background, so I'm not
Well, you're
worried.
making a big jump there, but okay.
Have them turn it up, Carol.
Welcome, Janet. Jody hasn't arrived, and I promised her that we'd start with her this evening, so maybe we should wait a little bit longer. But at least we have a quorum now.
So Cam, actually, the article, they're actually voting on it right now. They have a meeting going on, and so she's going to send a final copy while the meeting's going on. But there will be somebody in person on Monday to present.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think it's particularly for the private petitions. It's important for us to reach out to them so that they know that they do have to present on Monday evening, and that they're aware of that process that Dave so handily helped define late last year.
They were all given it when they ask Mike, please put this onto the warrant. They're handed that procedure.
Right.
So that having been said, I think the Board of Selectmen are the worst offenders this year, so I have to be very careful.
Oh. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, sorry.
No, nothing to be apologetic about. We've been waiting for some others to arrive, particularly the presenters this evening. But Carol, I'm thinking maybe it would be smart for us to get going, and you do yours first while we're waiting for Jody to arrive. I know you're under time
Whatever you'd
pressure as
like.
well this evening.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay, so I guess the first thing I should do is call the meeting to order. So we'll go through the standard process. This public meeting of the Dover Warrant Committee is being conducted remotely via Zoom in accordance with the temporary provisions of the open meeting law. This meeting has been publicly posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded, so take caution with what you show on screen as others may be able to see it. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. To open the meeting, can I get a roll call? Are we all already? Oh, yes, we are already recording, aren't we, Woody? That's great. To open the meeting, can I get a roll call of members in attendance? Woody Weiss?
Present.
Peter Smith?
Present.
Melissa is not here yet, I believe. Marty Howard?
Here.
Sarah Cadenia Kinney? Sarah? I can see you, so I'll assume that you're...
Hi there. I don't know why the Zoom has just booted me out twice and re-logged me back in.
Oh, okay. Well, good luck with trying to keep it going. I'm not sure we can help you much there at the moment. Janet?
Here.
And Steve.
Here.
Great.
Have you, excuse me, Cam, but Sarah, have you updated Zoom recently? In the upper right, click on it and then say updates available. Because if you are behind, Zoom gets very persnickety and starts doing these things like booting you off.
Oh, that's a good thought. Okay, I would also like to welcome Carol Lisbon from the Planning Board and our new Board of Selectmen, Dave Haviland. And I see Kevin McCabe and Michael Blanchard have just joined us as well. Hello, Michael. Hi, Kevin. Oh, and here's Jody. So we're able to hit the ground running now. Welcome, Jody. And we're actually ready to get going on the Housing Task Force proposal. If you are collected to do that, then why don't we start there? Then we will move on to the planning board and the DPW petitions as well. Okay, so you have the floor, Jody.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Jody Hsu. I'm the vice chair of the planning board and a member of the housing task force. And I live at 10 Main Street in Dover, if that matters for your group. But thanks for the opportunity to share this information with you. If we could go to the next slide. So as some of you might be aware, the Dover Housing Task Force was formed by the Board of Selectmen in 2023. We had our first meeting, I think sometime last spring, and we've met a few times, probably 4 to 6 times since then as a group. Members of the task force include individuals who represent different staff functions and boards throughout the townhouse. So the planning board, I'm a representative along with Carol Lisbon, our chair, the Conservation Commission, the Building Department, the Board of Health. So we have a really great comprehensive group of viewpoints, thinking all about housing and the challenges associated with housing for Dover. Our mission is pretty tight. We're really focused on, first and foremost, thinking about how we review multifamily developments that come before the town, because the process heretofore has been probably not as cohesive and streamlined and connected as it could have been. And so we've put in place processes to create a more streamlined approach to responding to multi-housing development applications that come before the town, specifically 40B or otherwise. So we feel really good about that. That was sort of point one that we were working to resolve. And Michael Blanchard and his office have played a huge role in the development of those processes. So that's great. The second goal is to think about how we communicate to residents and also other leaders in town about issues related to housing. It's really confusing. We're all reading a lot in the news about the MBTA Communities Act and hearing a lot about 40B developments and other ideas that people have for how we can address these issues in a really comprehensive and thoughtful fashion. So we want to be doing a better job communicating with citizens and also educating citizens about the issues at hand. So that's part two. And then the third part is to think about how we create a toolbox, really, of mechanisms by which or through which we can think about multifamily housing developments and just housing in general that benefits Dover's goals. And so it's a really terrific group, very much on the same page, thinking about how we work towards accomplishing these mission goals that we've set out. Next slide, please. Specifically for the purposes of tonight, one of the goals of the Housing Task Force lies in this special warrant article that we'd like to propose at town meeting. Essentially, we're looking to hire a consultant, a housing expert, who can work with not only the Housing Task Force, but also citizens across Dover to develop a very comprehensive plan for development and housing in Dover. We are right now fielding proposals from consultants, and we'll have more specific information on the cost for this project. We estimate it will be between $50,000 and $100,000, but obviously we'll have that in place before the open hearing is my assumption. And I know Robin's working hard on that. But really, it comes down to the fact that we need more expertise and a point person who can really shepherd lots of different viewpoints and walk us through the process to coming to some really comprehensive suggestions for the town of Dover. Next slide, please. And as I said, you know, the logic for this lies in the complexity of housing. And we see that coming from the state. We have a lot going on with 40B. We have a lot of open space. We have developers that really are looking at Dover and thinking about how to use the Chapter 40B affordable housing law to their benefit, and applications are on the rise, as many of you might know. Then we have the MBTA Communities Act. As you might know, if you're aware of that act or following it in the news, and I know Milton's been in the news in so many different communities, but our compliance with that state law is mandated by December 31st, 2025, which means that we would need to bring a bylaw to address compliance to town meeting in spring of 2024 in a best case scenario. So that's something that's very much on our mind and we're thinking a lot about. And as you also might know, we don't really have a big variety of housing options for older adults in town or young adults, employees, intergenerational families. We chipped away at that a little bit at town meeting last year with the passage of a new accessory dwelling unit bylaw, but that's kind of like the low-hanging fruit. And so we need to be looking at other ideas and ways that we might address that issue. And really, we just need some guidance and an expert who can walk us through the process of thinking about, what kind of a town do we want to be living in 5, 10, 20 years? And what do we need to do to get to where we want to be, as opposed to letting developers just sort of set the process in Dover. So we're just trying to be more proactive. Next slide, please. So as I said, proactive versus reactive approach. We're getting there. This housing task force, big strides with thinking about how to address multifamily housing applications in a comprehensive, cohesive way at the townhouse. And that's a huge change and a much more proactive way of thinking about it. But there's lots of other things that we need to be more proactive for. So we want to create less vulnerability to 40B development and think about how we're going to do that. And also to think about zoning bylaws that we might want to consider bringing before town meeting that encourage more smaller homes or different ways of thinking about development in Dover that meets the needs of our citizens, but on the terms of our citizens that we decide as a town, as opposed to having developers come in and try to establish that for us. Next slide. So ideally, an independent consultant can help us develop a long-term housing vision, and then also some associated strategies and pathways for, living up to that vision in the future. We'd be asking this individual to help us develop a comprehensive plan, and to do that by engaging in a community-wide process of listening and hearing from residents about what it is that they are, worrying about, thinking about, wishing for, all of those things. And we know we need that, that expertise. The MBTA overlay district, the compliance with the MBTA Communities Act, is a really big undertaking, and we want to do that in a way that town citizens can really understand what's at stake, what are we trying to build, what are we trying to accomplish, what do we have to try to accomplish. And so we could use some support in the development of that overlay district in advance of town meetings, so that we have a process that people feel comfortable with and confident in. Finally, we would just be working with the consultant to consider possible zoning bylaw changes that meet our goals as a town and that we could bring to town meeting with confidence. So that's the quick and dirty on the proposed Warrant article from the Housing Task Force. I'd be happy to answer any questions or get your feedback to how we're thinking about this.
Thank you, Jody. Do we have any questions? I would be interested, have we done any analysis on what the budgetary costs to the town might be if we were not to comply with the MBTA communities law?
Yeah, there is some analysis on that, and there's, I don't have it at my fingertips, but there's a look at the different grants that Dover currently is either in the application process for, or is already underway, and some of the language coming from the governor's office and the attorney general's office about some of that grant funding being put at risk. That's probably the biggest immediate analysis, and I'll follow up with you on that. I don't have that information at my fingertips, but I know that we have it because we've been starting to pull that. But again, part of the issue with the MBTA Communities Act is that it falls on the planning board to develop an option or options for citizens of Dover to consider at town meeting. And yet we don't necessarily have a comprehensive, cohesive response to your question or theory of how we want to think about compliance with the MBTA Communities
Right.
Act. And it really does need to be a thoughtful town-wide process where we go into it eyes wide open, because that's a really reasonable question and others obviously ask it. Right now, you know, the law says that the planning board is required to comply. And so whether or not we comply is probably beyond the scope of the planning board, but we got to come up with something in the absence
Right.
of somebody saying, oh no, we're not going to comply. So just those kind of issues are complicated. And so it's part of the logic for having somebody come in to help sort of guide those conversations and discussions at the town-wide level.
Right. Well, I think, Janet, you have a question.
So are there other towns who've gone through these things and that we can
Oh my
use as
gosh, yes.
examples?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
you'll read a ton about it in the news. The reason that Dover's compliance target deadline, well, not target, legal deadline is December 31st, 2025, is because we're considered a small adjacent community. We don't have obviously an MBTA station, but we are within a certain number of miles of one, and we're a small town. So they've put towns in different buckets, and we fall into small adjacent, which is the last group of towns that have to come up with a compliance strategy that is approved at town meeting. So we've got some time, and that gives us the luxury of learning what other communities are doing. But obviously, you know, it's a unique situation we find ourselves in as a small town without sewer, without town water, without a lot of other things that would be required for development at the scale that the state is requiring. So there's a lot that has to go into the consideration of where an overlay district like this would go. We have benefited from a consultant that was provided through a grant from the state to start to analyze these issues. And that consultant, there's a model that they use to figure out where we might be able to place an overlay district like this. And we've got, I think, 3 or 4 areas that have surfaced from that evaluation as potential areas for development, but nothing set in stone yet. It's just so far out, and there's still so many unknowns about the law.
So with the $50,000 to $100,000 consultant, are we just tackling those specific issues, or are you also including that long-term plan where we may have to consider more commercial development or water and sewer and all that?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to think about all of those things, like have a comprehensive look at this, because housing is such a thorny topic. You know, it's hard to understand how to approach 40B, for example, in a vacuum from MBTA or from just the kinds of potential development that Dover citizens actually might like. You know, how do we, for example, consider some sort of development that would encourage smaller homes? Maybe it's shared lots. You know, there's a lot of things that other communities do in response to the recommendations from citizens that we could consider as a town. You know, none of these things would be decided by the consultant. It's more like, how do we develop a menu that we can think about of ideas and approaches that make sense for Dover? Yeah.
I was curious, Jody, for the consultant, given the fluid nature of the issues that you just described, how do you set the criteria? Are there people out there that have done this and you feel confident would be able to provide the kinds of services you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I'm not part of the search for that consultant, but I do know that there are, it's not a huge pool, I would imagine, but there are definitely individuals in the state who are zoning, bylaw, housing development experts who do this work for municipalities. So who exactly that ends up being, I'm not sure who that would be, but ideally we'll have a number of candidates and we can, you know, compare qualifications, because we obviously want somebody who understands Dover, or who really wants to understand Dover, who has worked with other like towns. Not that there's anywhere like Dover, but but you know, somebody who's not coming from, you know, just, for example, big municipalities with, you know, 4 MBTA stations, because obviously we're not going to be talking about the same thing.
Sarah, you are on mute. Go ahead.
Hi, just a quick question, Jody. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Sarah. Thanks.
The adjacent small town designation, I'm just curious if you know, is that due to the number of acres that we potentially have for a developable area for a station, or does it have to do with our population density?
Okay, well, it has nothing to do with developable area for a station. So it's not related to the idea that, for example, an MBTA station would be located in Dover. It really has to do, I believe, with our housing, the housing that we already have, our population, and the distance we are from an existing MBTA station.
Yes, I imagine it's more a goal of the state to sort of resolve the incredibly tight housing situation that we have in the metropolitan area, and this is just a lever to try and force that through, I think.
That's what it is. Yeah, exactly. Trying to say, hey, this is the responsibility of every municipality throughout the Commonwealth to play a role, and the requirements that would be placed on an adjacent small town are very different than the requirements placed on, say, for example, Newton or, Cambridge, for example. So it's a very different ball game. And so they're sort of going after the big guns first. And that's why you're reading about it so much in the news with Milton, Newton. I mean, it's literally almost constant in the Boston Globe. So we're quite a ways out, but not so far out that we can afford to not be thinking about these issues in the very near term.
Well,
Thank you. No, I appreciate that, and I agree in that I believe Newton has also undergone the same process. So we're very close. Thank you, Jody.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Well, Jody, I think it's a laudable goal to take a more comprehensive approach. I think it's pretty important for the town to have that sort of understanding of what the options are and what the vision should be. So thank you so much for.
Thank you. Thanks for any feedback you have to it. I know that my understanding is that Robin Hunter will be presenting this on the 18th. Okay. So if you have any feedback or thoughts about how we can adjust any elements of this, we're all ears. And thank you for the time.
Thank you. And I also appreciate you jumping into the breach. I know it was short notice that you
no problem at all.
In, so thank you.
Happy to do it. Happy to do it.
Great.
Okay. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you. And of course, you're welcome to stay if you wish, but I know you have other things going on.
No, thank you. I'm going to hop off. Have a great meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Carol, I think we'll pass it over to you now. I know you've got a very tight schedule as well. So, which bylaw do you want to tackle first, the construction one or the solar array one?
Well, why don't we do the quick one first, and which is construction. And I say quick only because we did present to you on January 10th. And there's just a few comments to make about updates to some of your questions.
Yep. Very good. Woody, would you like to load that one? Thank you.
So this is the actual final draft of the bylaw. It's been blessed by Nina Pickering Cook. So this is what will be presented at town meeting for approval. And this is the version of the bylaw, the draft that was presented at the public hearing on February 26th. Zoning, certain types of bylaws need to have a public hearing by law. And if the public hearing isn't held, then even if the town meeting voted for it, it's null and void. So we did hold the public hearing on February 26th. For Dover, I think we had a great attendance. We had probably close to a dozen interested citizens. And it was very well received. And the specifics of it, basically what folks should be focused on and we're focused on was what kind of activities and what are the hours. So perhaps, Woody, if you could pull up the PowerPoint, we could just quickly go through that.
Sorry.
No, wrong one. There we go. Okay, so if we go to slide 2, this is exactly what we presented on the 10th. Question was asked about whether there was any quantitative information on the number of calls that have come into the building inspector's office about this. And we did check with Walter Avalone, our building inspector. He does not keep a log of the calls, but he did ask that we share the fact that of all the calls that he gets from citizens complaining about all kinds of things, because he's also our zoning enforcement officer, that the number 1 call is on the noise from construction. The bylaw hasn't changed at all. We're talking, 7 to 6, Monday through Friday, Saturday 9 to 1, with nothing allowed on Sunday. The fines relate to chapter 20 of Dover's general bylaws, where most boards and committees that have some kind of penalty fine system are consistent through chapter 20 of the bylaw. So we've maintained that, much to the thank of our town council. Next slide. This we reviewed with you also on the 10th, nothing has changed. If you look, you'll end up seeing that we actually have recommended of these towns, the strictest or the most limited number of hours. And again, because this is a general bylaw, it requires only a 50% plus 1 approval. And if it fails to pass, then I think Walter will continue to list noise complaints as his number 1 phone call. So thank
Carol,
you.
sorry if I missed this. What are the current hours that are permitted, or do we not have?
There are none.
Okay.
So if that's not clear in the slides, I will make sure to add that. That was an excellent question.
I just had
We have absolutely none now. So, if it's during the day, Walter can go out and say, gee, your neighbor's complaining. Would you mind shutting down on time or not starting at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning? And they can nod their head and do whatever they please.
I just had a very loud motorcycle going past my window. So if you could get that under control too, that'd be great.
So of course, once you open up this Pandora's box of noise, you get into motorcycles, dogs, roosters, lawnmowers, leaf blowers. We were asked to do this by Walter, specific to construction noise. And we've decided to take that approach to it. No, as a citizen, yes, absolutely. I've got roosters down the end of my driveway. But the issue of other types of noise this doesn't really fall under the planning board either, but other ones clearly don't fall under the planning board. And I think, as we had discussed back in January, that this is an area that's either ripe for citizen suggestions in a warrant article. Places like Cambridge, I think, and Concord and so forth have done citizen articles for leaf blowers and that kind of stuff. Also, as most of you who attend town meeting for a while know, that the best way to get to yes in Dover is to take issues in small chunks. So I thought that this was a great start to addressing the issue of noise. And we'll see how it goes.
Carol, you allude to the fact that your proposal is the strictest of all the surrounding towns, which is based on the fact that it looks like that we have a half day on Saturday.
Yeah, limited hours. Like, if you look at the chart, Concord is 7 to 8 p.m.
Yep.
during the weekdays. We're 7 to 6. If you look down that chart, you'll see that the number of hours, I think, are the most limited.
Yeah, but we're the only ones that would be restricting Saturday to a half day.
Yes.
And what kind of reaction have you gotten from the contractors in town about that? Because it would seem that would be complicated for them in terms of the hiring their workers for the day, that sort of thing.
So I spoke to a contractor who, excuse me, one contractor who works in many, many towns, actually works the least in Dover, but is a Dover resident, and then works throughout Metro West. And his comment was that these were, quote, extremely reasonable hours. unquote. So, we were asked to do this because citizens were complaining, not because contractors might have a little difficulty in keeping the noise down.
So Carol, question, so does that mean they can't work outside of those windows, or they just cannot
Only
have
out-
noisy work
No.
outside of those windows?
Only outside. So if you look, maybe, Woody, could you put back the actual bylaw? Let's go back to that. It's Jenna, it's in the bylaw itself, lists the
Okay.
various things that would fall under this. And it's basically outside noise.
Okay.
So if on Saturday they wanted to have the plumber and the electrician inside doing their thing, not a problem.
Okay.
One of the other questions, and I guess you might have covered this in the bylaw as well. Do you have any decibel limits on that noise? I mean,
No.
One person's noise is somebody else's reasonable experience. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and as my hearing, as I get older, my hearing gets worse, right?
Yeah.
But this is not a noise bylaw. It's a construction hours bylaw.
Okay. Okay.
I think some of the bylaws that we just talked about, relative to like lawn mowers and leaf blowers, they actually do get into decibel stuff. This is not that. This is saying
Okay.
if you're doing construction as defined in section A,
Mhm.
then you have to do it within these hours.
Okay, so I guess I was a little confused by your suggestion that they could work inside and that wouldn't be a problem, but literally taken, that would apply to them as well, wouldn't it? That they shouldn't be working outside those hours?
No, again, if you read the bylaw, there's a term in here that says that nothing in this bylaw should be construed to limit the ability to use construction equipment as described above when wholly contained within a structure.
Okay, very good.
So I think what we will do therefore is add a slide that addresses all your wonderful questions. Because we know folks probably won't read the bylaw.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that's great. No, absolutely. This is very helpful.
Got to get in the weeds, Carol, but house painting. Like, I think
House
literally if you
painting?
have to drive a truck to paint a house, I think it would probably violate the bylaw. If you have to
Nope.
carry the paint for the truck. Is that right?
Not if you read the bylaw.
Okay, so I
You want to pull up the bylaw again? Hey, guys.
And you're the lawyer, Steve. I thought you would have read it.
I just been reading it live here. There.
So section A talks very specifically about that kind of stuff.
Okay, you don't need to pull it up. I trust you. I just
Okay. I mean, we're talking logging, land clearing equipment, pumps, generators, air compressors, diesel engines, nailing guns, circular saws, that type of stuff. I thought you were going to say if somebody was painting and had their boombox on real loud.
That too.
well, idling truck from a painter, I guess, would violate it, though, right?
I'd have to look. I'm not sure.
But Carol,
Yeah.
I'm correct. I'm correct in the way I read this, that if I want to use my chainsaw on my own property, that's fine.
Exactly. Work on your own property is exempt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can make as much noise as I want.
Absolutely.
You might have unhappy neighbors though, would you? Okay, Carol, thank you very much. I think we've gone beyond the necessary question threshold.
Well, your questions were great, and we will add a slide that addresses all of them because they were all very good points. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Carol. And now I'll leave you holding the floor to present the proposed solar array bylaw.
Okay. So if we pull up the solar array PowerPoint, we do not have a bylaw to show you yet. We met with Jasmine, our town planner, and I met with town council this morning, and she will be checking it out and doing her thing. And possibly by open hearing, we will have the actual bylaw, if not soon after. And as soon as we get it, we'll send it on to you as well.
you.
So slide 2. Just to set the stage for all this, what we're talking about here are ground mounted solar arrays. These are solar panels that are mounted on the ground directly or on a pole. So they're basically solar arrays that are not on a roof. Currently, all solar arrays are considered structures and accessory use per our current zoning bylaws. But small and medium scale are not currently defined in our bylaws. So we had a situation this past summer where a 230 kilowatt solar array came before the planning board, which per the chart on this, per the data on this chart, classifies it as medium scale. These are definitions per the state law. And we discovered that we really didn't have the bylaw and the regulations we needed to properly and comfortably do a site plan review of it. So that's the genesis of this bylaw. So the next slide, please. So back in 2015, when the town was approached by a commercial solar company about putting in a commercial solar array, the town worked to create a bylaw that addressed large-scale solar arrays, which is 250 kilowatts and larger, and zoned the area outside of the transfer station as a solar array overlay district. That bylaw includes very specific site plan review criteria for solar arrays. But we don't really have the authority to use that list, which is, as you can imagine, quite different than the list of site plan review criteria you'd be using for a pool. We don't have the authority to do that for small and medium solar arrays. So that's another reason why we're going through this. So the purpose of this bylaw is to establish the standards for permitting, design, operation, and modifications while protecting public safety, natural resources, wildlife corridors, and residential property and neighborhoods. And this really comes from Mass General Law, not unlike what we just heard about all the various housing initiatives coming down from the state. The state is also a large proponent of solar. So they too have put together a Mass General Law that makes it very clear that local municipalities are expected to support the installation of solar arrays. So we want to put together the bylaw and the regulations that give us some control of that. So the if you could go back to slide 3. Just for a second. Thank you. So some of the detail that we hope to address in the bylaw and then the regulations that back it up that are different than what we normally see in a pool or a cabana or a barn, have to do with fire safety. Clearly with that kind of electrical generation, our fire department wants to have a different type of access to that property and different knowledge, a more detailed knowledge of what's actually there because of all the other electrical components. From a public standpoint, we want to ensure public safety. That means when appropriate, fences, signage, notifying folks of what might be there. From a neighborhood standpoint, we're looking at screening vegetation to minimize the visual impacts of a solar array. There are placement issues to make sure that neighbors aren't impacted by the glare or shadows or storm runoff from all the panels, or sometimes the noise from some of the other electrical equipment that's there. And of course, we want to protect wildlife corridors. We want to make sure that wildlife is safe. And of course, we have the whole issue, which we'll be hearing about next, on stormwater management and the impact that solar arrays can have as a heavy rain is coming off, 40,000 square feet of solar panels. So that's what we'll be addressing on that. So thank you. And Woody, number 4, if you would. So what we're doing is proposing in the bylaw two different pieces. One is we have to change chapter 185-10, which is Dover's table of use. It says what can be done where. So small and medium arrays, we're proposing will be allowed in all the residential districts with site plan review. And then allowed in all the other zoning districts. We have a business district, we have a medical professional district, we have a manufacturing district. So they will all be allowed there. They'll be allowed in the open district, which is where our schools are, and Carroll Community Center. It will just not be allowed in the Conservancy District because that is property that is meant to be open space and conservation. So by law, we cannot, as I mentioned, we cannot do anything that would make it more difficult to install solar arrays. Nothing in the bylaw will in any way prohibit installation. And we think that by putting together the regulations that support this bylaw, it will actually make it much easier for not only residents to install solar systems, because they'll know exactly what the requirements are for the application and exactly what the issues are that need to be addressed. And clarify something that right now is totally undefined.
Mm-hmm.
So next slide. So this is a zoning bylaw, so it will require the 2/3 vote. If it passes, solar medium arrays will be prohibited only in the Conservancy District, and it will allow for us to develop additional site plan review regulations that address the specific best management practices and issues that we just talked about. If it fails to pass by 2/3, the small and medium arrays will be allowed throughout Dover with only our standard site plan review criteria to use. So that's where we are.
Okay.
Thank you.
A question of zoning, Carol. Are there any other large solar array zones allowed in the town, or have we exhausted our supply of them at the moment?
Well, we had that one application in 2015 that resulted in the 2016 town meeting and the development of an overlay district. So for large solar arrays throughout the Commonwealth, you need to do an overlay zoning district. So the only overlay zoning district we have was the property surrounding the transfer station.
Okay, and so if somebody came along with a proposal that would not be allowed, or would
no, we have the current large scale bylaw that allows them to make the proposal, identify property, and the town would have to vote to allow it in an overlay district like that.
Okay, great. And I had one other question that's a little bit tangential to this, but there's an increasing amount of technological change that enable wind energy turbines. What are we doing about those, particularly small scale ones? I mean, there are even ones that you can put on top of a house now, and I'm just wondering what zoning regulations you have in your pocket to handle those.
So our table of use, chapter 185-10, does list windmills. So those are allowed. I could pull it out if you'd like right now.
No, that's okay. Just wanted to be sure it was covered, and even small little wind turbines and things would be allowed under that, because they're not all strictly windmills these days.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the definition.
Yeah,
I'll take a look at that. That's an excellent question. I'll look back at it because that's been around for a while. So I will check the definition of it, and if it doesn't seem to address the current technology, then that's something we'll have to consider. We'll be back next year.
Great. Always like to keep you in a job.
You know, as I think we've talked about, our zoning bylaws are so out of date that you know, we discussed this with Nina today, interestingly enough, and you know, her suggestion was, you know, town council her suggestion was that just to address the issues as they come. So we had this medium solar array issue, so we're addressing it.
Mhm.
The question of windmills and turbines now is a great one, so we'll address that one as well. And over time, we'll address all these new technologies and some of the new challenges that are facing Dover. It's not unlike the Housing Task Force, which is hiring a consultant to help us look at the kind of bylaws we need
Mhm.
for the new housing environment,
Right.
which is MBTA and multi-house, all kinds of other multi-housing and other kinds of multifamily housing.
Yeah. Great. And there's also these overlapping areas where, for example, I know a lot of towns and cities are introducing ordinances or bylaws to compel the implementation of at least some elements allowing people to have electric vehicle chargers, even in family dwellings and so on. So that might be something you might need to look at as well.
Well, you know, I'm disappointed that Dover does not have a sustainability committee.
Mm-hmm.
And a group of us have made pitches over the years to the selectmen to do that. And for whatever reason, they've chosen not to.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the Green Communities Act, you know, does help in that, except that we don't have a specific group of people, either government of town professionals or town citizens that are organized in a way with the mission to explore all the possibilities of sustainability. Unlike
Indeed.
most of the towns around us.
I heartily agree with you on that as a citizen.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking as the Warrant Committee chair in this, but I think we do need a sustainability committee as well.
Sherburne even has a part-time sustainability coordinator.
They had one. She resigned, unfortunately.
Oh, did she? Oh, she was great. She was doing great stuff.
She was very good. I agree.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? I seem to be the green one on this committee, so that's why I'm asking all the questions.
I'm with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Carol.
Okay, thank
Much
you.
appreciated, and we'll see you on Monday.
Great, and thank you. I'm going to be staying for the stormwater as well, but
great.
thank you all for your comments. This helps us inform and adjust the presentation for open hearing. So thank you again for those questions, comments.
Excellent. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your being here, and we look forward to your presentation.
Great, happy to be here. I'm actually going to share my screen, my presentation. I have some notes and stuff in it. So,
okay,
I'm just here. We go. One sec. All right. Can you all see my presentation?
Yes.
Great. So article yet to be determined, stormwater bylaw. And so this would be for the proposed 2024 updates. So stormwater is defined by the US EPA as runoff generated when precipitation from rain and snow melt events flows over land or impervious surfaces without percolating into the ground. Unfortunately, drainage stormwater systems also carry pollutants like oils and fertilizers and sediment and trash into water resources. Rainwater that falls on paved surfaces, lawns, parking lots, and sidewalks becomes that polluted stormwater. So just kind of a layman's terms picture there on the right, you know, obviously the rainwater runs off your driveway, runs off your lawns, and then makes it to our catch basins, our drainage conveyance systems within the roadways, if we have them in your neighborhoods, through the piping conveyance system, and then discharges at an outlet down gradient into our water resource areas and water bodies. So why now? Protecting the quality of Dover's water resources, including our streams, our rivers, our estuaries, groundwater supplies, is a priority for the town of Dover. Pollutants from stormwater runoff are a contributing factor to the impairment of Dover's water bodies, including low dissolved oxygen levels, high turbidity, and total suspended solids and bacteria contamination. Obviously, with climate change, you know, in the past summer, you know, I know my department was directly affected as our facility flooded twice in August, which we've recently moved back in last week. Happy to report that to the Warrant Committee and the Dover residents. And then also the main point is compliance. The DEP requires all of the municipal entities, especially us, we're in the Charles Water Rivershed, to comply with the MS4, which stands for Municipal Separate Stormwater Sewer System. So with the initiative of this bylaw is to bring us into compliance with our current permitting. So why do we need stormwater management? So the photo below, obviously the right is kind of the nose, and the left would be in an ideal situation. So that's obviously, this is an exaggerated situation, but the different type of applications you would see, whether it be a farm and kind of manure going into, you know, water body, water resource, wetland, an oil spill, you know, clear cutting a lot, as you see in the top right photo, and then left would be kind of the controlled mechanisms to not further degrade the community. So obviously the advantages to a well-functioning stormwater management system reduces flooding in the community, removes pollution carried by the stormwater runoff, it infiltrates and recharges our natural groundwater supply in kind, it protects our drinking water supplies, protects local stream banks from erosion. And believe it or not, that's exactly what we saw on Claybrook Road. The engineers that did that feasibility, that wasn't from scouring of the Charles River. They believe that to be the non-controlled discharge of runoff from Claybrook Road itself, degrading and deteriorating the banking. And then overall, just to protect the general public health and welfare of the community. So what are the objectives of this bylaw? The objectives would be to protect our water resources, comply with current state and federal regulations, which is the MS4, which we touched on, and also the NIPID's permit, to prevent illegal connections into our municipal storm drain system and waterways, also referred to as illicit discharge. And then reduce sediment and erosion in our municipal storm drain system. So the bottom right photo is kind of a, you know, a side diagram of a catch basin, if you will, right? Water infiltrates in it, you know, with debris and sediment. There's most of them are typically there's a 4 foot or 2 foot to 4 foot sump underneath the outlet pipe where those, you know, debris can collect. Prior to, you know, the water building up and going downgrade back into the water bodies. And as you guys are seeing now, if you live off Walpole, you may have seen activity in your neighborhood. We just started our catch basin cleaning today townwide. And then also to control and mitigate construction site runoff and post-construction runoff. We were chasing this crazy all summer. With sites that didn't have proper stormwater controls on the site, which took sediment and debris and, you know, obviously went into the roadway and created debris and flooding and, you know, a lot of adjacent neighbors to new development saw that. And then also, you know, to create the stormwater management for new development and redevelopment. So how will this impact Dover? So to minimize stormwater runoff for major developments, to minimize pollution created by the stormwater runoff from development, to provide drinking water protection and groundwater recharge. And then this will also set up the controls in place to respond to objectives A and B, but also to provide proper operation and maintenance of these stormwater facilities. So what would trigger this stormwater bylaw and a stormwater review? That would be a land disturbance greater than 5,500 square feet. The only control the town and planning board and town engineer we have would be large parcels of over 1 acre development that triggers the NIPID's permit. So this would put a little bit more control in the town to have a say in what's going on in these smaller developments that are affecting our stormwater system. So also in kind, any activity that would increase the projected runoff into the Dover's municipal stormwater management system. And then any proposal to alter or modify our existing town-owned drainage conveyance system. And also a trigger point would be any large excavation or changing of topography of over 100 cubic yards, bringing in filled material to change that existing topography. So who would be the stormwater authority? So the stormwater authority, we would establish that through this bylaw, which would be the Department of Public Works on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. So in the previous slide, what does that mean? So if you hit one or more of those trigger points, the requirements could entail a stormwater management plan. So that would be, a civil site design on how they would plan to infiltrate and capture the stormwater runoff that the development has created on that parcel of land and infiltrating it on site and not letting it enter the town of Dover's municipal drainage conveyance system. Tree protection plan. Erosion control sediment plan. So obviously, if a lot of these sites that we saw break out this summer that the street sweepers seem to be working on overtime would have to clean up. You'd have the straw wattles and siltation fests, and so if there was erosion control blankets, so if there was any of those measures, we'd be able to mitigate that at the review level, and that those would be implemented on site, deferring any of this increased runoff into the municipal owned and adjacent neighbors as well. And then also the stormwater authority would conduct those site inspections. So again, thank you all, and just kind of a more of a mission statement that clean water is everybody's business. And at this point, I guess just for future steps, I certainly thank Carol and the planning board and the Board of Health and Conservation and ZBA, the building department, our town engineer, our town administrator, and the tree preservation committee. This has been, I like to call it our stormwater coalition. There's been many entities involved in this. There's been a lot of feedback. I had a sit down today with Nina, so she has our bylaw. So down the line, whether it be in the next few weeks or months, as this shapes up, as soon as that draft becomes a legal vetted document, I will certainly pass that back to the Warrant Committee. So I appreciate the time to kind of give you all a 30,000 elevation view of the initiative to be compliant here in Dover with our federal and state drainage permits.
You're on mute.
Yeah, Cam, you are muted, sir.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Kevin. Do we have any questions? Well, other people are thinking. I'm interested in what the enforcement mechanisms should be in the event that that activities take place that don't comply to that zoning bylaw.
If this isn't in place?
Yes, if there is somebody who just dumps a whole pile of soil in a certain place without seeking approval for it from the DPW, what are the enforcement mechanisms to force them to correct those?
Currently, none.
Mm-hmm.
So unless it's over a 1 acre parcel of land, that triggers the NIPDs and has a lot more oversight review. Currently now our bylaw is, there's some verbiage in there that says kind of as the town engineer allows. I may have not quoted that verbatim. So really there is no mechanism. So this hits kind of those, a lot of what we're seeing now in Dover, where these lots are getting clear cutted and Dover's stuck, picking up the responsibility of that discharge stormwater downstream in the residents.
So is there any plan to implement some stick into this process or not?
So that's what this would trigger as those thresholds. So any of that, basically land clearing or disturbance of 5,500 square feet or greater, this would trigger that. So this is going to be broken up basically into two things. So as the bylaw develops, obviously we'll send that to you, and then concurrently, legal and our stormwater consultant Tate and Howard will be. We're trying to set up a meeting for next week. There'll be a regulation which later the Board of Selectmen would vote. So that'd be more of those. So I guess I can't. In the grand scheme of things, yes, there'll be those trigger points, but legal will make that determination between the regulation.
Carol, you want
Yeah,
to mention something?
Yeah, so I had mentioned under the construction hours bylaw, chapter 20 of Dover's general bylaws, which is where our fines and civil penalties apply. Right now, the draft bylaw does refer to that chapter as well. So that there's that. I would also say that when the planning board does site plan review, we will now, as a result of this new bylaw, will now require that we receive from the DPW or town engineer, okay, a written approval of the stormwater plan of the applicant. So that they would not be able to do, they would not get a site plan review done. They certainly would not get one approved. And until the site plan review is approved, they cannot go back to Walter and get a building permit.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And Kevin, you were saying in weeks and months, so we have our town meeting at the beginning of May. Are you planning to propose this bylaw for the town meeting?
Yes.
So we don't have weeks and months. We have a pretty tight schedule there.
No, it's pretty far along. And like I said, it's in the hands of legal counsel now. So I'd imagine within the next few weeks, she will have completed her review and it'll be absolutely ready for town meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. I really appreciate you joining us this evening. And
absolutely, thank you for the opportunity.
Great. And now I think we're going to move on to the budget overview that our town administrator is going to be presenting. Thank you, Michael, for your patience in waiting so long. I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me have my screen off. I was eating a late dinner, so that was perfect. So thanks. I am just going to work on sharing my screen. That work okay?
Yes, it does.
Perfect. All right, so thanks for having me back. I think this is our third update to you, the Warrant Committee. So I did want to just highlight again, we've talked about a lot of this, but some of the challenges that we've been facing, and a lot of the same information we're prepared and will be prepared to share at open hearing. But obviously the inflationary pressures that everyone is facing for energy, healthcare, labor costs. The budget includes new positions that have been added for the community center and other key town operations. It sees an increase in debt service for the community center, the second piece that was approved, as well as capital items. Includes repair and replacement of aging infrastructure. The Dover Sherborne Regional Schools, while a very low percentage increase, certainly the number is still impactful. So, 313,000. A Chickering school increase, which I will say hot off the presses, they have reduced this number. This presentation tonight does not address that. We just didn't have time to go back, but it is a lesser number. With my screen share, I can't find that email, but it is, I think it's 5 something. But that cost, the schools have been before you, but again, a lot of that driving was out of district replacements, new math curriculum, and an additional 0.5 FTE at the school.
It's
And, you know, all-
4.86%, Michael.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And, you know, all of this working towards the goal of responsibly using our reserves, trying to keep increases in property taxes moderate and predictable, and maintaining our AAA rating and fiscal health of the town. You know, as a reminder, since I was last here, or first presented the end of November to the selectmen and the beginning of December to you, that first pass of the budget, sorry, 10% increase. We've made a number of reductions in the budget, as you know, obviously it is a very challenging year. And so I just wanted to run through some of those as of today, and then we'll talk at the end on our last slide of some of the further reductions and considerations that are on the table. So first, we reduced the number of FTE requests. Although, you know, we felt these were very critical positions, particularly project manager, which also serves as kind of an internal IT person, which we don't have. We did cut that from the budget, as well as a currently funded, but it's been vacant for a few years, IT analyst, which is kind of a lesser IT position, as well as a new position that was proposed for payroll and benefits coordinator. We've reduced the financial consultant support by $50,000, and we'll talk a little bit later, but that relates to the request for a finance director, so we would need less consulting services by an interim finance director. This budget includes $305,000 in state funding that we believe can be applied to repairing culverts as that were damaged as part of storms in July and August of this past year. And those were on the capital plan, so that helps alleviate some of that. We've used $319,000 in excess free cash to fund the town's long-term OPEB liability, which we'll touch on a little bit. And, you know, really very significantly in helping reduce the capital budget requests, we were able to use 1.1 million in ARPA funds to reduce specifically capital for stormwater, which Kevin had previously mentioned is repairs and upgrades related to the flooding at the garage, as well as a large six-wheel dump truck that the DPW is well overdue for replacement. So those were all really big, helpful items. So we'll touch on, let's go to the next slide. So I know this is a lot, and we're going to look to probably cut some of this down for open hearing, perhaps remove all of the prior fiscal years, maybe just so the FY24, because I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm happy to send this to you after the fact. And I should note also, obviously at the end we'll take any questions. Neither Robin Hunter, who really did a yeoman's work helping with this spreadsheet, nor Carl Valenti, who was our interim finance director, was able to be here tonight. So I'm certainly happy to answer all the questions I can, but in all transparency, you know, in terms of the deep dive into our budget model and some of the history of some of these things, I just don't have yet. So any questions I can answer, I'd certainly be happy to take them and get back to you. And obviously, everyone will be, the whole team will be there at open hearing to address questions there as well. So what we're showing here is kind of a higher level, the entire budget, not just focusing on operating expenses, which is Article 4, but to look at Article 4 plus Article 5 capital, plus the special financial articles, because really that's all the funding that needs approval by town meeting, all of which is primarily supported by the tax levy. Then we wanted to show the various uses of free cash that follows the strategy that the town has in place. You know, we have significant cash reserves anticipated at 10.5 million, but a significant portion of that has already been earmarked to fund liabilities that the town has. The reason being is it allows us to fund those liabilities, but not have spikes in the tax rate as a result. And that's something I know the town and we really striving for as we work through this budget. When the selectmen, and I believe, you know, members of the Warrant Committee and other groups were part of putting this strategy in place, you know, they recognize when you have variations in the amount of capital that you're funding, you know, and you're primarily paying for those taxes, for those items out of your tax levy, your tax rate is really going to have spikes up and down, and that spike can be very difficult for residents and households to absorb. So this is all part of a very long-term strategy that's in place to kind of smooth some of that out. In the first yellow table, which would be Article 4, the operating budget, what's really noticeable is the increase is 6.8%. That's still a big increase, but it has worked down from that original 10% number. As you know, the tax levy can increase by 2.5% each year, and then you can also add some new growth. That doesn't include excluded debt, which is also on top of that. Fortunately for us, even with those limitations, we have excess capacity under the levy limit, which does allow us to fund years where the increase is higher. So this year, there are a couple items that are really driving the increase, and I'll go into more detail, I think, on the next slide, specifically highlighting some of the operating budget increases. But really, it's the new positions that we've added. There's also, as you see, a significant increase in debt and interest payments, and that's for servicing the debt we put on our books last year to fund the additional $6.774 million for the community center, as well as capital items that were funded last year. I also just wanted to highlight under insurance and pensions, 319,000 of the 419 increase relates to the town's OPEB, additional funding that we made a commitment to fund, which is for people who aren't sure, that's our retiree health costs. And we're working to fund it over time to get to the 60% funded level. And that number, that it does reside in the operating budget. So that does add to the increase. As I mentioned in the previous slide, that is going to be funded through free cash, however. The reason you'll see an increase this year is that last year we actually didn't fund this item because we didn't have an actuarial report available at that time. So that's why you'll see it popping as a variance of 419 or 419 this year. With respect to capital, I keep saying we, I wasn't here, but we presented last year that over the next 5 to 6 years, we'll have a lot of capital needs, equipment replacements such as large trucks for DPW, and a number of significant infrastructure projects that are part of that plan. This year, we started with a capital budget request at just a little shy of $4 million, but the committee, working with our staff, vetted the requests. We got, as I mentioned, we got creative and found some state and federal funding that we could use, all enabling us to reduce the impact to taxpayers significantly. And the overall ask now is just under $2 million, of which right now we've earmarked about $657,000, to be funded via debt and not the tax levy. The other big item here is the special articles. So that of that 1,400,000, it's important to note that 743,000 is the town of Dover's share of the region's OPEB. And again, part of our strategy for use of free cash, we voted to fund that based on an actuarial report for the region, as well as the desire again to get to a 60% level of funding for that OPEB as well. And then finally, the green below is the free cash that we're currently have on the books to be used at town meeting to offset the $48 million of funding requests. So this year we are earmarking 3.7 million, and included in that is tax relief for the original piece of the community center. That's the 18.7 million that was funded prior to last year's 6.7 million. Yeah, I guess that was my last thought there, sorry. And we also, again, are funding from free cash some of the capital expenditures. That's coming in at 714,000. We're reducing the tax rate, which we've done in prior years, using $800,000. And we are assuming right now that all of the special articles, financial articles, will be funded by free cash, and that comes over at just $1 million. And again, we talked about that includes the regional OPEB, that also includes contributions to the general stabilization fund and the housing study, which you reviewed earlier tonight. And although we're still working on that number, we're currently carrying that at 100,000, which is the top range of that estimate. So in the next slide, we'll go into more detail, as I mentioned, on some of those major operating budget. And we broke out the cost into sort of different buckets. We were trying to figure out the best way to present this. So the first bucket is related to the new community center. So we have new asks that are comprised of a community center director, 2 custodians, and then an increase to utility costs for the building. And then under that, and we weren't sure where to put this, but Parks and Rec has also asked for an additional 0.5 FTE for a currently part-time assistant, which would make that position full-time, which relates to increased programming they're seeing, and particularly as it relates to the anticipated demands as a result of the new community center. We hope, as we all do, this is going to be a really popular building and get really good use. For the Board of Selectmen, we also have some new hires. As I mentioned, we have a finance director. We did eliminate, again, as I mentioned, the request for the project manager, as well as the existing but unfilled IT analyst position. We also highlighted an increase in a stipend for ambulance. I think the fire department was here, but just to recap, it's really something we needed to do. We have an on-call ambulance and we need EMTs to be available, especially on weekends. And the fire department found that by increasing the stipend, we do have sufficient staff to cover the ambulance, which obviously is critical and important for public safety. You'll also see we have some fees associated with the solar project, but those are offset by decreases in utilities. But we just want to highlight that. So you do have offset in those other lines. We have some additional paving that the DPW director has requested that's based upon a study that was done to properly maintain the roads. And we also have an increase in solid waste disposal tipping fees, which is partially offset by savings in maintenance costs for the roll-off loader. As you may recall, that was approved last year at town meeting as a capital item, but we're currently in I guess you call it a trial period for contracting the service out at a savings, and it is going well. And the plan is to continue that service. So that, and again, the tipping fees will go up regardless of whether we were doing that work or we were contracting that out. So certainly well better than when we started the budget process. We have an increase in the operating budget that's still high. And in the last slide, I'll talk about some of those other opportunities to get creative and reduce some of the requests. So, I think first and foremost, obviously, if you're driven by, the community center hasn't come online yet. We are not up and running, and certainly won't be until hopefully things look on track. So later this year. But the reality is we're not exactly sure how this is going to operate. As you may be aware, there's been a lot of discussion between the selectmen, Parks and Rec, some other boards about how this community center should be managed. So I am working directly with the director of Parks and Recreation. He's talked with the board, Park and Rec Commission. I've talked with the selectmen to try to think of some creative solutions on how we might be able to better staff this community center, understanding that we don't know exactly what it's going to involve. Perhaps there'll be some cross-departmental cooperation, and ultimately that may involve holding off on hiring a director and eliminating that position from the budget for this year. Having some sort of trial where we could work with Parks and Rec for them to operate the community center while still maintaining the selectmen are responsible for the building, and the reporting for the operation of the community center would still be through the selectmen in this office. So that's kind of in progress. We're working with town council on what that might look like. Related to that, given that the building won't open till later this year, we certainly could phase in, and I think we'll make that change to phase in phase in when we hire the custodians. If we hire them in July 1st, there's not much for them to do yet in that building. But the second piece is, depending on the creative solution we come up with for the management of the center, there's also an opportunity to perhaps start with one custodian. So we could not only phase one, but we could potentially eliminate one. And again, see how it goes. That combined with the additional 0.5 FTE, making a full-time position in the Park and Rec office, we believe, and the Parks and Rec Department believes, that would be sufficient to get this building up and running. At the end of again, it wouldn't be a full year, but prior to town meeting next year, we could come back, and if this didn't work, okay, then we could come back and say, we tried this, but we really do need a director, or we tried this, but we really need 2 custodians. But I know we'd be in a much better position to make that case if we've tried and it just wasn't working, versus at this point, we're just making our best educated guess on what we need for staffing. So we believe that could be something really positive. As the Warrant Committee may or may not know, we've recently lost our treasurer collector. He resigned for another opportunity, so very happy for him, but sad for us. However, whenever we have a vacancy, we do try to get creative and look at other ways to consolidate responsibilities or rearrange work. So as you know, we have a position of a finance director, so we are trying to very quickly, because we don't want to delay the recruitment for this critical position, but we are very quickly looking at and working with our HR director and ultimately the personnel board on creating a combined finance director, treasurer collector position. So what this would allow us to do is the treasurer collector position would be, for lack of a better term, slightly upgraded in salary, but not nearly at the cost of a brand new director position. So we are working quickly to see if we can make that happen, because we believe that would be another cost saving measure that would be very helpful, again, given this very difficult budget year. And then also, whether there's an opportunity to reduce or eliminate the $50,000 request for additional paving roads this year. We all agree it's critical, but given the difficult budget year, that's a consideration that perhaps that could be pushed out. And we could look at that in a future year, or again, look at a lesser amount this year. So with that concludes my update. As I mentioned, a lot of this, it's all coming in hot, as I say, because we have open hearing on Monday. But the reality is the budget is not fully there because of these outstanding issues. We're prepared to present that at open hearing and hopefully get some feedback on some of these considerations and support for it. And ultimately, come to a final budget that's ready for your recommendation and ultimately a vote at town meeting.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin, and I certainly appreciate the creative financing restructuring that you've done, that you and Robin in particular have been working on. So that's really good. So I'll throw it over to the floor for questions.
Just a quick question, Mike, were the numbers that you showed us tonight, do those come from the version 10A budget model that we got a couple of days ago?
10A, it should be dated 3/7/2023. Yep. Yes, yep.
Okay,
that's correct.
Michael, it feels like a lot of this is pushing things from this year to next year. Particularly in terms of the positions, I think Chickering comes off next year, so that our debt goes down. Are there other reasons to think we'll be in better position next year to manage these additional positions? Because it's hard to argue that we don't need the project manager, for example.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. So, I don't want to give the impression we're pushing everything off. I think what we're trying to do is be creative, for example, with the finance director position. If we can combine that with the treasurer collector, that request goes away. And so we don't need that additional position. With the community center, we don't know if we'll be back next year or not with these positions, but we think we can try it without them, see if it works. And then, if we do still need them, we'd be in a better position next year to really demonstrate the need, because the building's open, we've worked through it, and it's just not working for whatever reason. I'm hopeful it will, but in case it didn't. And the project manager, while we've removed it from this budget, yeah, we're not just pushing it to next year. I think we're just realizing that this year it's not doable given this large increase. Again, in the scheme of things, one salary, I mean, in just math, it doesn't make a huge difference. But the perception that, you know, we are asking these new positions, we think it's important to tighten our belts and show that we are making the efforts to bring this budget down as much as possible. So, you know, I think we'll have to, if where the project manager isn't in the budget, if it stays out of the budget, you know, we'll have to look at that. Is there another way? You know, we currently have a consultant, that IT consultant that does our services. They're great. It's going very well. You know, we definitely feel the need, however, for someone still in house, but you know, maybe there's a different way we can think through of how to solve that need. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, I guess it's not clear there is an answer in terms of what's going to make us better. I guess another question would be, and this may demonstrate my ignorance about things. A lot of this budget depends on use of free cash. How much we have approximately 10 million in free cash now. We're using, I don't know, 3.5 million here.
3.7. Yep.
In the budget. How much free cash do we expect to generate this year, and how much free cash do the selectmen feel is appropriate for us to carry as a town? Or do we think that we should maintain 10 million in free cash? Are we comfortable letting it drift down? What's our long-term strategy?
Sure. So this is a good example of something I would prefer to defer to our interim finance director, but I'll try to answer the question, which is Dover's in a really unique situation where we basically have too much free cash over the last number of years. And there's actually been a strategy to reduce that number, you know, through strategic use of the funds. You know, for this year, the selectmen are comfortable at that 3.7%. I mean, sorry, 3.7 million. So, you know, we start at 10.5, we use the 3.7. You know, there's free cash, or I should say cash reserves are made up of free cash, but also our stabilization fund. We have our capital reserve fund. We have our OPEB. You know, so a lot of that, when you look at bond ratings and things like that, they capture all of that. We're actually holding, I'm just trying to open the spreadsheet quickly. Cash that we're holding for our AAA rating is, we're looking to hold 10% of revenue, net of stabilization fund. So that's about 3.1 million. So we'll be well within that, range of what we're comfortable holding. You know, this past year, and I'm trying to see if I can open also the budget model. We actually, our previous target was just, it was about 8.5 million, and we came in about 2 million over at that 10.5. So we, you know, the model that was used assumed 8.5. We actually came in at 2 million over. So we're in a pretty good position to use it, because that really is the goal, to more strategically use some of that to bring that balance down.
Dave.
To quickly add to that, I know that the Board of Assessors also has a very conservative growth assumption of 100,000, and it has been 2 to maybe 5 times that in reality over the last 5 to 7 years. But they wish to remain conservative, and that should allow the free cash to build for next year as well.
That's right. Thanks, Dave.
I know there was some discussion on creative uses of debt as a means for reducing the tax levies. And Dave, at the Board of Selectmen, you raised a mechanism that I was interested in understanding a little bit better. Could you explain what that mechanism is?
Well, what we're trying to do is match up on some of the capital items that have a long life, that are worthy of being bonded over a 20-year period. And we have a bunch of small needs to borrow money coming this year and in the next couple at least. And so what we were thinking about is banning those, use bond anticipation notes until we get a critical mass to go out to the market. Otherwise, we're going to be forced to take these small amounts of debt and to bring them to market. The term on it maxes out at 5 years. So that's going to be very expensive, and we would rather match the asset with its useful life and stretch it out to 20. And by banning it, that will give us that capability.
And what is this banning mechanism? I don't quite understand what that is.
It's a bond anticipation note.
Okay.
So think of it as very short-term financing, anticipating being refinanced by a municipal schedule when we go out with a bond underwriting.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you for that clarification.
Can I just ask a question?
Absolutely.
As an alternative to a bond anticipation note, given what Michael just described as a large cash reserve position, is a town allowed to, in lieu of issuing that anticipation note, if we anticipate 2 years or 3 years from now is when you're going to have the critical mass to issue a bond financing where the economics make sense, can you use part of that cash reserve, sort of an internal financing by the town for that 2 or 3 year period, as opposed to having to issue that short-term note?
That is getting into topics of expertise I do not have. So I don't know if you know, Michael, but I don't want to try to answer that.
That's a good question. I believe the answer is no, but I don't know why. And I will try to find that out.
Well, actually, Marty and I are meeting with Carl tomorrow
Yes.
to try and get a better
That's a
handle
great time.
on
I'll be
that.
there
So
too.
I'm sure we
can ask that
can
question.
raise that then. Mhm.
It's a great question. I just don't want to give you the wrong answer
Right.
by not knowing.
No, absolutely. It's a reasonable position. Well, thank you, Michael. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, then thank you so much for coming this evening. I know your plate is very full at the moment, so I appreciate that. It really does help us to get a better feel for where we're going at the moment with the operating budget, and that's really important right now.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay. And I noticed, Anna, you've joined us this evening. Are you planning to give us an update on the land transfers bylaw, proposed land transfer bylaw, right?
Yes. Well, actually, I have a question for you all because we've been an unexpected turn of events this evening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I don't think I need to do another presentation, but I'm more than happy to run through it with everyone. So in the first time in 18 months, but as anyone can remember, 5 years plus, we didn't have a quorum. So we were going to vote
to hear at the moment, Anna. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me now?
Difficult to hear at the moment. I'm not sure what might be happening.
Better now?
Is everybody else hearing clearly? Okay. Please proceed.
Oh, sorry.
No, you don't need to apologize.
Okay. Yeah, so on our agenda, so Concom on our agenda tonight was going to be to vote in advance and confirm our warrant article, but surprising all, we did not have a quorum. So my question for you all was, would it be all right for us to submit a placeholder and vote to confirm after the fact? Our next meeting is the 27th.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure. I mean, we can discuss that at some future occasion. I mean, we have to close everything off fairly quickly, simply because we have to get the blue book out, right, Peter? That's the big challenge we've got at the moment. But we can discuss that offline and
Okay.
how we might handle that. But thank you very much for joining us, just for that clarification.
Sure. I was just like, I wasn't sure if we wanted to pull for all of this year, or I'll send you where we are on our draft, and so it's ready.
Yeah. Okay. I did see the draft as well. But thank you so much for joining us to elaborate on
Sure.
that, and we'll pick that up fairly quickly.
Perfect. I'll
Now,
email
you is there a plan to present at open hearing on Monday?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the critical one. I mean, we've just been regarding a lot of these petitions as a way for us to make sure we aren't getting any real surprises at open hearing.
Okay.
And so as long as you can make that presentation, then I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, we've got someone to do the presentation and a bunch of people to arrive to answer questions after the fact. We kind of overcorrected, I think, but I think we're good.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so
Perfect.
much.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
We will now move on to other business. And I think I should sort of lay open my naivety and lack of understanding of how we pull together the agenda for the open hearing on Monday. And I was hoping if Melissa, you could help us sort of clarify how we proceed in preparing that, seeing you did that most recently last year. You're on mute. Yes.
Yeah, so I think what I did primarily was just kind of follow the pattern of the earlier years of pulling together the high level deck, which was kind of used to flip through the various components of the meeting. And then I've got a script from prior meetings as well. I can definitely share that.
That'd be great.
I would say one learning I had from this last year, well, two. One was I think we probably didn't present enough of the financial budget at that meeting. I think it was done kind of at a high level since some components were still coming together. I think that's something Robin already mentioned too, that we should probably go a little bit deeper at open hearing.
Right.
The other thing is there were some areas I hadn't heard from and that had not responded about coming to present to us that were present at the actual meeting that then wanted to present. So I would do one last round on all the articles, just to see if people do want to have a few moments to present. I think it was Article 20 potentially last year that we ended up kind of sliding in because someone was there. So that's the other suggestion is to really make sure we hear back from every single person and allot time for them.
Right. I've asked everybody to reach out to their liaisons to make sure that everybody's aware of the process. And as Dave pointed out, perhaps before you joined this evening, Melissa, everybody was given that guidance that was prepared late last year on the requirements essentially for presenting at town meeting, and clearly being able to present at open hearing is an important milestone within that. Okay, then yes, I might sort of offline work with you on that if I may.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to share kind of the past presentations and script for it. And I know we had everyone from this group present last time, but we did not do any voting on the day.
Right.
I think we would continue to keep that tradition.
Correct. Yes, I think that's advice that I'm certainly going to follow. Yeah. But then we will have a lot of work really pretty well immediately after open hearing on going through a lot of those proposals and budget estimates and so on. Okay. That is pretty much it, but I really wanted to also let people know that it is a meeting in person next Monday, and if you could try and be there a little bit early, just so we can have a decent structure of seating and all the rest before the meeting proceeds. It will be broadcast on the television chat, the town live. I'm hunting for words for it now, but on the town.
Dover
live.
Sherburne TV.
Yes, Dover Sherburne TV. That means that we really need to be have our act together, as it were, for the meeting. Are there any other discussion points that we that you have this evening you would like to bring up?
Kim, so what are our roles on Monday?
It's basically a fairly passive role. I suggest we're listening to the presentations rather than having to actively present, but it is a warrant committee meeting, and so we will have the standard procedures of opening the meeting and all of that stuff as well. Peter, is there anything else you would add to that, or Melissa? Right.
Yeah, I
No.
think last year, Peter, did we do a roll call to open it for?
Yeah, I mean,
attendance at
it
the
is a
beginning?
meeting of the warrant committee,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
we have to go through the formalities.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So it's very similar to basically how we did the joint school meeting of
Mhm. Right,
doing that to open and then kind of handing the majority of it over.
right. And Michael, I might reach out to you as well in the next couple of days to get your input on how we should what the flow of the meeting should be, and what your thoughts are on how to handle that.
That would be great. Oh, my camera's off, sorry. That would be great. I actually, because it's been virtual the last few years, I went back and watched some 2017, 18 meetings, just because I don't have a sense of the setup of the room. So we're going to work on that with Felicia. I think would be our best internal help to how to set the room up, the technology, the AV equipment. So we'll make sure that's ready to go for you for Monday night.
Right.
There's consistently feedback on the Great Hall of just the acoustics in that
Yes,
room
yeah,
and some of the microphone and being able to hear things. And I think last year we also had some banging in the walls. That was
Yeah, so
happening.
that happens anyway.
That
It's the
is
building.
ongoing. Yeah, we'll see what we can do about that. And hopefully next year, I might suggest you hold your meeting at our new community center, which
Oh,
hopefully will
yes.
solve
Now,
all of
that
those.
would be that would be a great development. Yeah. No more banging.
That's right. They're an old heating system, so.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you.
Any other items we need to discuss this evening? Then I look forward to seeing you on Monday evening. And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Kim, do you want us showing up at 7:30 or 7?
It's actually at 7, the meeting.
Oh, it's such a 7.
Oh, sorry, is it 7 or 7:30? Now you.
It says 7:30 on this.
It's 7:30.
7:30. Yeah, so I'd say if you're there by about 20 past, 25 past, that's absolutely all that we need. I just would prefer not to have people coming in late if we can avoid that.
Right. And it's in the town hall, the Great Hall.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cam, I just
Oh, go ahead.
sorry,
Sue.
go on.
Oh, heavens, we've got the minutes to go through.
I was just gonna say I was derelict in getting the
Doing.
minutes printed. So can we approve them next week or next
But
time
we
we
still
have a
have the
meeting?
the minutes for 2:14 that we have to
Yeah.
approve as well. Did
Were
it?
the minutes of February 7th approved?
Yes, we did the first one, but not the second. There was a couple of questions, and we decided we weren't going to sort of adopt those without your being present, Peter. But we could defer that to the next meeting as well, if you'd prefer.
Fine, but I'll send in the 7th.
Great, excellent, thank you. And
I will circulate them, Cam. I just didn't get a chance to do it this afternoon after I emailed you.
No, I understand that, and it's no problem. I know I put you in a position of having.
No, I just forgot about it, so thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, I think. But the other thing I did learn learned from the Board of Selectmen meeting was that, in fact, even if you weren't at the meeting, we're not asking you to confirm that the contents of the minutes were accurate. We're just asking for apparently acceptance of the minutes as they stand, and so that doesn't necessarily mean you have to abstain if you weren't at the meeting. So I think that's correct, isn't it, Dave? That was what I heard
It
from
was
them.
my question, and yes, you are if you're just accepting the minutes, everyone can vote. If you are approving the minutes, then only those who were there should vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, with that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A seconder?
Second.
Then I think we can acclaim by hand. I think it's going to be probably unanimous as it
We'll
is.
accept it and approve it, Cam.
Thank you, Dave. And I wish you all a very pleasant evening, and thank you so much for coming.
Thanks. Good night, all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.